We are continuing with the chapter 3, and this is the last part, part 4 of chapter 3. And now we want to discuss about a scenario. According to this scenario, 4 high school students found bomb making instructions online, built a device, and detonated it at school. One of them later claimed they didn't understand how powerful it and would be and didn't intend to hurt anyone. He said, "These are really dangerous sites. I am not a troublemaker. I am just a regular kid." So how should we evaluate that statement? Is the website responsible? Are the students fully responsible? Does intent matter? Does access to information equal endorsement of its use? And this raises a fundamental question about dangerous information. Should it be restricted, or does responsibility ultimately lie with the users? Please try to analyze this scenario and think about it. Let's consider an emergency scenario. During a riot, participants use a popular messaging application to coordinate their actions. Law enforcement asked the company to temporarily shut down the system to prevent further violence, but the government lacks clear legal authority to order it. Should the company comply voluntarily? Would shutting down the platform protect public safety or suppress lawful communication for millions of innocent users? And should the federal government ever have the authority to shut down parts of the internet in an emergency? This forces us to confront a core tension: security versus freedom, collective safety versus individual rights. There are no easy answers here. So let's think critically about where the balance should lie. Now we will discuss about online sales restrictions. Some federal and state laws prohibited or restrict certain products from being sold online, such as contact lenses, caskettes, or prescription medications. In some cases, manufacturers are also restricted from selling directly to consumers. Supporters argue these laws protect public health and safety. Critics argue they limit competition and increase costs. Some estimates suggest billions of dollars in added consumer expense. So here are the key questions. Which of these laws might have legitimate public safety justifications, and which might simply protect established business interests? This forces us to think about regulations, consumer protection, market freedom, and unintended consequences. Now let's turn to net neutrality. Net neutrality refers to proposals that restrict how broadband providers, like telephone and cable companies, manage internet traffic and set fees. The core idea is that internet service providers should treat all data equally without blocking, throttling, or prioritizing certain content for payment. The debate centers on whether broadband providers should act as neutral carriers, or whether they should have flexibility to manage networks as they see fit. This is both of regulatory and a market question. There are two different but related issues. The first one, whether the companies that provide the communications network should be permitted to exclude or give different treatment to content based on the content itself, on the category of content, or on the company or organization that provides it. The second is whether the companies that provide the communications networks should be permitted to offer content providers and individual subscribers different levels of speed and priority at different price levels. The latter is sometimes called tiered service. Let's look at a practical example of net neutrality. AT&T exempted its own DirecTV streaming service from mobile data caps, a practice known as zero rating. At the same time, other companies had to pay for similar treatment under what's called sponsored data. So here is the issue. If a broadband provider favors its own content or charges competitors for equal treatment, does that violate the principle of treating all data equally? Supporters argue it benefits consumers by reducing cost. Critics argue it distorts competition and gives large companies unfair advantages. This example shows how net neutrality debates are not abstract. They directly affect markets, innovation, and consumer choice. Let's summarize the core debate in net neutrality. One side argues for equal treatment, that all consumers and all data should be treated the same without discrimination. The other side emphasizes the market, arguing that flexibility and competition will create better services and incentives for investment, ultimately benefiting consumers. So the question is, should regulation guarantee fairness, or should market force determine how broadband service operate? This is a classical tension between regulatory control and economic freedom. Net neutrality, this is equal treatment, includes charging all consumers the same rate for sending information over the internet and not giving priority to any particular content or consumer. Would restore part of the concept of common carrier, based partly on the view that telephone companies and have a monopoly on transmission of information, and that companies that control transmission should not be permitted to control access to content as well. Many internet content providers and large companies such as eBay, Microsoft, Amazon, Netflix, and Google argue for net neutrality rules. Without the rules, some argue they will have to pay higher rates and communications companies will give special treatment to their own content providers. Some groups argue that allowing communications companies to set varying rates would be devastating for the internet as it would squeeze out independent voices. Only big companies and organizations will be able to afford the prices necessary to ensure that their content moves fast enough to be relevant. Charging different rates for products and services is not unusual and makes economic sense in many areas. Before the FCC relaxed all the regulations in 2003 and 2005, telecommunications companies had little incentive to invest in broadband capacity. In the few years afterward, they invested hundreds of billions of dollars. Speed increased, prices fell, and the added capacity was essential for new phenomena such as streaming video. Opponents of additional regulations say there should be no major new regulation without evidence of harm in the current system. In February 2015, the FCC made a major net neutrality decision. It prohibited internet providers, including mobile carriers, from blocking, throttling, or prioritizing web traffic in exchange for payment. To do this, the FCC reclassified broadband as a telecommunications service under Title II of the Communications Act, treating providers as common carriers. The FCC chairman at the time argued that this was not regulating the internet, but rather ensuring fairness, similar to how the First Amendment protects free speech without controlling its content. This decision marked a significant shift in how broadband was regulated. Despite regulation, opposition to net neutrality remains strong. Some argue that an internet service provider favoring certain content is no different from a cable company placing popular channels in premium tiers. They see it as a business model, not discrimination. Others point out that internet service providers already exercise some editorial judgment. For example, blocking illegal content like child pornography or filtering spam. So the question becomes, where is the line between legitimate network management and unfair discrimination? And should broadband providers be treated as neutral carriers or as business with discretion? Here are more examples used by opponents and critics in the net neutrality debate. Sprint, for example, throttled speeds for unlimited data users after they exceeded 23 gigabytes in a month. The company argued that prioritization only occurred when the network was congested. In another case, a mobile operator called Digicel considered blocking advertisements at the network level unless companies like Google paid to have their ad delivered. These examples raise key questions. Is throttling during congestion reasonable network management, or is it discriminatory treatment? And should carriers have the power to block content such as ads unless paid. This is where technical network management intersects with competition and speech concerns. Facebook offered a free ad-supported internet service called Facebook Basics in India, so that people in the thousands of poor and remote villages could have free internet. This is called a zero rating service. It was in addition to other full-fledged services of Facebook in India. The India Telecom regulators blocked the service because it violated their net neutrality rules. Indian law does not permit charging different rates for different services. This ruling was supported by an organization of Indian startups looking to provide internet access to these remote areas, but who would have been unable to afford the expansion if competing against Facebook Basics. Let's close with some core net neutrality questions. Should companies be allowed to treat content differently based on what it is or who provides it? For example, should an internet service provider be able to favor its own streaming service or a competitor's? And what about pricing models? Should companies be allowed to offer different speeds at different prices? Is that simply market flexibility? Or does it create unfair advantages and limit innovation? These questions go to the heart of how we structure the internet, as a neutral platform or as a tiered marketplace. So we have completed chapter 3. We handled with all concept of chapter 3, and in the coming video we will begin with a new topic in chapter 4. See you and have a nice day.